Okay, I think we're going to get started here. My name is David Stewart. I'm the CEO of Approve. Very happy to have you join us today to go through the State of Mobile Security report. Michael is the star of this show, so I'm going to let him carry on with digging into the data that came out of the research. Michael, over to you.
Thanks, David. And yes, indeed, welcome to this webinar on the State of Mobile App Security 2022. I'm Michael Sampson, the Senior Analyst at Osterman Research that led this research program in collaboration with Approve. Osterman Research is a market research and consulting firm that focuses on delivering insights on topics like cybersecurity, data protection, and information governance. And the report that we released earlier this month that you will be able to get from the Approved website is this one here. This is what it looks like on the front cover, the State of Mobile App Security in 2022. And we would encourage you to get a copy of this report and read through the findings. We'll talk about some of the findings in this webinar. We'll highlight the key ones, but there are also some additional items in this webinar that are not in the report, and we'll get to that a bit later on in today's session. In order to run this research program, we commissioned a survey in the United States and the United Kingdom of security directors and mobile app development professionals. In order to take the survey, the respondents needed to be using mobile apps, and their organization had to say that the use of mobile apps by customers was important to their business success. It was a multi-industry, cross-industry survey, so there were no restrictions or exclusions on an industry basis. We're going to talk through some of the research findings today. The first one is this one. Mobile apps are increasingly important, but bring risks too. We asked respondents to rank the contribution of mobile apps to business success on 3 time periods. And you can see that currently, when we did the survey, 74% indicated that mobile apps were core or absolutely core to their business success. In comparison, they indicated that, or only 25% of respondents indicated that would have been the case 2 years previously. So that's taking that 74% number and dividing it by 3 in order to get down to the 25. And then we also asked about the expectation in 2 years, and you can see that it continues to increase as respondents believe that mobile apps will increasingly and continue to play a core or absolutely core part to business success. We also asked respondents to indicate on these 2 dimensions whether mobile apps were important or extremely important. So 79% said that it was important or extremely important to enabling customers to access services. Mobile apps, therefore, is a delivery channel for customer engagement. 54% said that earning revenue at the organization was intricately tied to mobile apps as well. It wouldn't come as a surprise, therefore, with mobile apps being so important to business success, to customer access, and to earning revenue, that non-functional mobile apps and APIs would have a bad effect on the organization. 45% said that a non-functional mobile app or API would have a moderate effect on their organization. 30% said a major effect. So if we combine those 2 numbers together, we've got a fairly significant share of organizations saying that mobile apps that don't work will impact and impair our business success. They will impact and impair the ability for customers to access the services that we offer, and they will impact or impair our ability to earn revenue. In terms of risks and threats of mobile apps, mobile app security is tied to important outcomes. This chart shows the percentage of respondents who indicated that these issues were significant or highly significant as part of why they would pursue mobile app security. Avoiding loss of corporate reputation at the top, avoiding personal career consequences from security breaches, second at 63, avoiding loss of customer trust, third at 62. Those, first 3 or 4 items, 5 items are very closely aligned. So there's this basket or bundle of threats or issues to organizations if security is not working in an appropriate way. The second main research finding that you'll find in the white paper and that we'll talk about briefly today is that secure development practices don't prevent runtime threats. When you look at the threats on the development side of getting a mobile app or API ready to release to market, you've got issues shown here, coding vulnerabilities, vulnerabilities that are unpatched. There's no shift left emphasis in the organization. So it is viewed as a bolt-on or an add-on rather than something that is intricately intertwined into the development of mobile apps in day one. Misconfigured storage, which enables threat actors to get access to code in development, or databases not segmented properly, which has some downstream impacts in terms of breach scope and so on. However, even if you get all of the development practices perfect, it doesn't address the runtime threats are now shown on the screen. Those include things like abuse of stolen API keys, credential attacks, traffic interception, access via manipulated devices, or access via tempered apps. Even if you do all of the development stuff perfectly, these runtime threats and types of attacks can continue and will cause significant challenges for organizations. David, what sort of issues have you seen in the market in terms of runtime threats?
This one was really interesting because we see a lot of discussion in the media about vulnerabilities and problems caused by vulnerabilities in software code, and there are a lot of vulnerabilities and a lot of problems, but and as a result, this sort of shift left movement which has happened is definitely a good thing. But the problem is that a lot of people haven't really realized that fixing all your vulnerabilities, even assuming you could do that, would mean that you were completely secure. And I think that's actually articulated very well in the report, in the sense that you do have to do the development stuff to improve the security of your code as written. But even if you had perfect code, there are threats which will still be real threats that you have to do something about. So you've got that, secure code in the development phase, and then you've also got to secure your assets, your platform when you deploy it. And so we've definitely seen that. We exist. Well, most people who are on this webinar probably know what we do, but we're protecting the mobile app and the API once it's deployed, and creating a shield around that so that it can't be abused. And so we're very much on the right-hand side or the deployment side of the picture. But obviously, the vulnerability side needs to be dealt with too. So I thought that was really tuned very nicely into what we see as well.
Thanks, David. One of the comments that we often make in terms of specific practices around security is that each practice by itself is necessary but insufficient alone to deal with the range of threats and risks that are in place. And so just echoing what you've said, even for organizations that have embraced the shift left movement in a good way or a great way, there's still a range of threats and risks that sit outside of that shift left emphasis, which we classify in this call as runtime threats.
Yeah.
Before you go into
the next one, I realized that I've forgotten to remind people that if you do have questions, please enter them into the Q&A box down at the bottom of the page, and we'll get to them at the end, hopefully. Sorry, carry on.
The third research finding that we will talk about briefly today is that API use is critical, but the way they are accessed is risky. We asked respondents to indicate their visibility into a range of runtime security threats. And this chart shows the percentage of respondents indicating that they had poor visibility. 60% said they had poor visibility into credit fraud. 59% said they had poor visibility into when fake accounts were created, which gives threat actors a footprint in apps and the ability to see what's going on. 56% said that they were unable to detect or see data stolen from APIs by scripts, and you can see a variety of other runtime security threats that are shown on this chart. My comment earlier about the similarity in the numbers of in one of the other charts equally applies here. From 50% half to 60%, 3 out of 5, many organizations cannot see, detect, or have optics on common runtime threats. There's a significant attack surface created by storing API keys in apps. We asked about organizations that were storing third-party API keys in mobile apps, and 45% said that yes, they were. 7% said that they didn't know if their organization did that or not. 48% said that that was not a practice that they did. When we compare that to the number of third-party apps in each mobile app, we found an average of 31 based on the responses in the survey. If 45% are storing the API keys in mobile apps, and API keys can be extracted and then abused, and in conjunction with that, organizations are storing an average of, or are using an average of 31 third-party APIs in each mobile app. You can see here that we also have an average of 40 in-house APIs in each mobile app. And if you put those two numbers together and make the assumption that organizations that store third-party API keys in apps probably also store their own API keys in mobile apps, that's a significant threat surface when threat actors are able to extract and abuse the API keys. Another issue that we see is that security practices fall behind the competitive push. We asked respondents to indicate the emphasis or the priority of these ideas in their organization. One half of respondents said that they would rather release an insecure app than delay a new release offering new features. So the competitive push for getting new capabilities out to market is ahead of the willingness or the desire to make sure that what is released is secure. 42% of respondents said we do not require third-party developers to attest to following our security policies. We may indeed have security policies that we pass on to third-party developers, but we, for 42% of organizations, it's not something that we actually require that they go, yeah, we have done that. That is something that we have done. 41% acknowledged that they lacked the right level of security skills for developing and operating secure mobile apps and APIs internally. And when you look at the other issues that are shown on this chart, then one conclusion that you can draw is that organizations are rushing to get features to market, but lack key security practices. Any thoughts on what we've talked about, Dave?
Well, the API key one is interesting. I've made several comments over the last few years. I actually feel sorry for mobile app developers. They're constantly being told by people that they should stop storing API keys in mobile apps. But those people that criticize them don't give them a good idea of where they should store them. Just tell them not to do it. And so we actually have been working on this problem for a while, and we recently enhanced the approved product to actually have a capability to allow the approved cloud to store API keys, and then to make them available to to valid app instances just in time as they're required for an API request. So that means they don't have to be stored permanently in the app, but can be downloaded as needed, which provides a solution to that problem, because we all know that storing API keys in apps is probably not the smartest thing to do, but it's a difficult problem to solve if you don't have another way of doing it. So this is an issue we've been dealing with for a while. So I actually think the numbers have improved. So I think if you'd done that same survey a couple of years ago, that percentage of 45% would probably have been significantly higher.
Well, David, we've called this research the State of Mobile App Security in 2022. And if we have the opportunity to recommission this in 2023 or 2024, it'll be interesting over time to track how those numbers change and the visibility into those types of threats change as well.
Yeah.
The final main research finding that I want to talk through today is this idea here that important industries are lagging on mobile app security. The data that I'm about to show you is not in the white paper, so this is the only place that you'll find it at this time. I did a correlation of 3 industries in comparison to all others, so tech, healthcare, financial services, and all others. This is one of the charts that we showed at the very beginning around percentage of respondents indicating this was core or absolutely core to business success, that being mobile apps. You can see that tech was very early 2 years ago, 68% saying that it was core absolutely, growing to 86% currently, and then to 92%. In comparison, healthcare, financial services, and all others 2 years ago, only 17%, 15%, 12% said that it was core or absolutely core. And so as a consequence of this, there's a significant push, or there must have been a significant push over the last 2 years to rapidly increase maturity. And the challenge of that from a cybersecurity point of view is that when you go for fast development, as priorities change significantly, as we've seen in the world over the last couple of years with the pandemic and the work from home workforce and the shop from home customer base and so on, rapid development and rushed security in combination can result in lingering and hidden vulnerabilities that have not been addressed and that cause challenges or open scope for threat in the future. So this would be one concern that I would have in looking at the data from an industry point of view. The second one is that financials in comparison to the other industries appear to be somewhat more complex, and yet they have much to lose. In comparison to tech and healthcare, you can see that on average, financial services has a worse position on these security practices. So 46% of the healthcare respondents to the survey said that we do not clearly communicate our security policies to in-house app and API developers. And it's not something that financial services even do for their own developers. The second one here, we do not vet the security of third-party APIs that are integrated into mobile apps. 38% of financial services organizations are not doing that. 46% say that we do not have the right level of security skills for developing and operating secure mobile apps and APIs, and some of the others that are here. So there's a significant threat scope here for financial services industry in comparison to both tech and healthcare, and in some cases also in comparison to all others. So we would be looking for, if we were to do the survey again, for financial services to decrease their complacency and increase their maturity across these issues. When we look at storing third-party APIs in tech and healthcare are the two that were most commonly doing that. 82% of tech respondents said that they stored third-party APIs keys in their mobile apps. 40% of healthcare, financial services, and all others lag slightly behind. For tech, there's definitely a high risk with having such a high number, and also for healthcare, there's a high unknown. 13% of respondents that they do not know if this is something which they do or not. And once again, when I look at this slide now that I'm talking through it, it should actually say storing third-party API keys rather than the use of APIs in the apps. And then this is the industry breakdown of the poor visibility one. I've highlighted the issues where more than half of the respondents said that they had poor visibility across these issues. You can see for tech that there was only one issue that gets red flagged. For healthcare, it's all but one. For financial services, it's all but 5. For all others, it's all but 3. So poor visibility into things like data stolen from APIs by scripts, credential stuffing attacks, account takeover by other means such as phishing. When we look at this at an industry level, there's a significant lack of visibility into what's going on in all industries aside from tech. Which brings us to the conclusion for today. Let's tee this up briefly and then we'll move to Q&A. As David mentioned, if you have a question, please feel free to put that into the question and answer screen. So yes, shift left is important, and it's something that organizations should be doing, and it would be wrong for organizations to ignore the shift left emphasis of the last few years. However, the need to protect against runtime threats is something which needs to be done in parallel and in conjunction. When we asked respondents to rate the priority of various security strategies, these were the ones that they indicated as being a priority or an extreme priority. 64% said identifying and mitigating security vulnerabilities in mobile apps before code is deployed was a priority or an extreme priority. And of all the ones here, this is the top ranked shift left idea. But you can see also the priority of other issues, the runtime issues that are shown in this chart. 57% said that it was a priority or an extreme priority to make sure that stolen API keys can't be abused at scale. 55% said they were keen on removing the need to store API keys and other hard-coded secrets in mobile apps. It was a priority or an extra priority for them to find an alternative way of doing that. And then a couple of other runtime threat issues shown in positions 5 and 6 on this diagram. So for organizations that are using mobile apps, where mobile apps are critical or core to business success, customers use them to access services, they're important to the earning of revenue, then our conclusions would be these 3 here. Number 1, increase visibility into the current runtime threats that you are seeing or that your organization is facing that you are not seeing. What is happening that you are blind to or unable to assess? Secondly, assess the efficacy of the current solutions that you have for these runtime threats. And if you currently lack the ability to see what is happening, then it's also likely that you lack the ability to protect against those. And therefore, the third conclusion is to take urgent action to identify the shortcomings that you have identified for your organization, reduce the threat scope that you are facing, stop the attacks that would undermine and breach the data, and protect what is important to your organization. If you want to get in contact with me, my contact details are shown here on this slide. Also, Michael Osterman's the principal analyst at Osterman Research, and his details are shown here too. David, let's go to Q&A at this point.
Great. Yeah, we've got a couple of questions here. Just an observation on that last one. It's actually, for me at least, quite encouraging to see that, you know, the discussion we had before about shift left versus shield right and the runtime attacks. It sounds like there's an appreciation of the importance of the runtime threats, even though, you know, there's been a shift towards the shift left side. Maybe it's now beginning to rebalance. And although people haven't necessarily done it yet, they may have recognized that this is something they need to be doing. So that's actually quite encouraging. Okay, so first question we have here is, we've heard about API keys stolen from cloud repositories. So even if you do keep them out of your mobile apps, there's a risk of them getting stolen anyway. And how can you protect yourself against that? So what you've got here is what happens if an API key escapes into the real world, or at least into a place where it's essentially compromised and available to bad people to attack your platform. And that can be a problem because quite often the reason people try and protect the API keys so strongly is they're a static secret, and therefore if they do escape, you can build a script that uses it, and you can do some serious damage. And the simplest way to protect yourself against that kind of at scale exploitation is to have a second factor that has to be presented alongside the API key. So something else, and the approved solution provides a token which authenticates that the API key is coming from a genuine mobile app instance, which means that if the API key is used from a script, then of course it will fail. So that's the sort of mechanism that you need to use if you're trying to store or protect API keys from being exploited if they do escape. Second question, how much do you think the problem of runtime security not being a priority is due to shortage of trained security personnel across the industry? And I think you touched on that in one of the sections, Michael. I don't know whether you have any further insight into that.
Well, I'm sure it's a contributing factor, David. We know that there is a cybersecurity skills shortage in general, and organizations do not have the level of resourcing that test these things. We can't wait until the cybersecurity skills shortage issue is solved, because we're waiting for a very long time. One of the recommendations that we make at Osterman Research when this topic comes up is to look for managed or cloud security services that are able to decrease the labor load that an organization needs to carry itself, and by consequence provides a way of mitigating against the skills shortage that we see.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, well, I'm conscious of time, and we tried to cram this into 30 minutes to try and be as efficient with the attendees' time as possible. I'd just like to recommend that you check out our resource page on the approved.io website, where you'll find these 4 things plus many other goodies in various forms, from written to video, etc. And obviously reach out to us if you have any specific questions. And therefore, I'd just like to thank you, Michael, for getting up so early in the morning in New Zealand to do this. We very much appreciate it, and we've enjoyed working with you on this project.
Thanks, David.
Okay, so thanks to everybody for attending, and there'll be a recording of this should you wish to circulate it to your colleagues. That'll come out in the next few days. Thanks a lot. We'll leave it there.